The manga starts and the very first thing that we see is our main protagonist hearing his mother's beautiful voice telling him to wake up. As he slowly opens his eyes, he sees his parents driving and also checking up on him. As he looked, he quickly moves his head to his side to see bright lights over on the city side. While he was traveling, his mother calls to him, asking if Kuro is awake. As he opens his eyes, we see that Kuro was actually in a classroom nursery bed, and from the side, the teacher asks if he's feeling alright. He gets up, adding that he's feeling a little nauseous and is not doing so good. As he lowers his head, he looks to his side, only to wonder if today will end as fast as possible. To end his day, he quietly walks as piles of students walk right beside him. We learn the hard reality of Kuro's school life. In the prime years of his life, he is suffering from extreme isolation and loneliness. As he enters, he hears his classmates go crazy about their lives, and as everyone was having the best time of their life, he is extremely lonely to the point where he feels as if he is the only one in the class. Despite him being an absolute loner, a man immediately greets him from the side. He looks back only to see Haku. As he apologized, adding that he didn't want to scare him, he smiles, adding that he was about to just go home. Haku asks why he would go home, and Kuro on the other hand, adds that he has been feeling terrible. As he starts to get nauseous one more time, he starts to close his eyes. Then, his vision fades and immediately it was pitch black. Instead of falling to sleep, he sees this weird hallucination or memory of some sort. In these memories, he was holding people as if he was ready to kill them, but he was mowing down people like he was an absolute unit. He moved his arm to his side, and he sends a man flying through dozen-meter thick concrete walls. As his slam created a dark mist, Kuro saw that there were people who were trying to kill him. But as he quickly wakes up, his friend Haku asks if he's dozing again while standing, and as he mocked him, telling him that he should maybe take care of his sleep. Kuro has been not in his clear mind, and he's been going through these cycles that he cannot explain without any clear explanation. As a warning ring sounds through the big, tall buildings of the city, the announcer screamed that a storm is coming, and as the announcing pole breaks in half, there was an intense, furious battle going on. As one of the girls slices the throat of a man, the figure smiles with a devilish intent, and as she lands, she kept smiling. As black mist surrounded almost everyone, the entire street was covered in this golden and black murk. As groups and groups of people were asked to check it out, we actually see the gut-wrenching sight. Dozens of people were killed and a great massacre occurred in the vibrant streets of the town. As one of the girls makes a troubled expression, our main protagonist, on the other hand, walks to the street and he has been feeling extremely sick. It has gotten so worse that he doesn't even know what to do. He doesn't have anything special to do. Every day he goes to school, comes back home, but strangely for the past few days, he's been feeling extremely sick and he gets visions. As another vision blurs him, this time he was dashing through a thick forest, and as he dashed like it was his last day on Earth, in this dream, he jumped over a space, and as he landed on a highway, a car approaches from the side, and a loud crash sound completely startles him. Immediately, as he sees to his side, he sees pitch-black darkness, and he starts to feel extremely off. As he throws up on the other side of the road, he starts huffing for air. From nearby, a woman calls out to him, asking if he is all right. As he looks up, a beautiful black-haired woman smiles at him. As he kind of gets spooked out, the girl literally jumps from hundreds of feet, and as she lands with a soft poof, she looks at him. Immediately, seeing this, instead of doing anything that a normal person would do, he was about to throw up and he does. The girl, on the other hand, cries that she surely isn't that ugly, and as she approaches him, she brings out her hand and she touches him, and she tells him that this truly brings her back. As she said this, immediately, he had no idea what was going on. The girl, on the other hand, wipes his sweat, and as he started to ask what is happening, the girl closes her distance and she tells him that she hopes that they both meet once again. As he once again goes into this hallucination, this time he sees that after the crash, there were bodies, and as the figure leaves once again into the thick forest, the figure continued running through the forest, and in this vision, he sees that he gets a picture of a kid sitting beside two dead bodies, and as smoke flew from them. Immediately, we are shown back to the present where Kuro just sits in this dark alley of some sort, and he questions reality itself. The figure who was in front of him completely vanished, and he questioned whether it was a ghost. As he was leaving, a horrible dark mist was just behind him, and as it vanishes once again, this strange event was about to change his life forever. Now as a news reporter was reporting on the latest incident, we learn that in this world there are storms, and a storm is usually caused by a messed up individual who ends up getting and developing a strange superpower which allows them to basically become a superhuman. Once a superhuman goes out of control, they are then subdued. As the news reporter was saying this, Haku, on the other hand, was walking home, and he wondered if his friend Kuro was doing all right. Kuro, on the other hand, has just been going through this strange cycle where he encounters people, then he gets this strange hallucination. In his apartment it was pitch black darkness, but Kuro, on the other side, kept throwing up again, and it was so disturbing and painful for him that he cried on what exactly is happening. As he gets up from this terrible experience, he goes out to see that the news were going crazy, and it kept pointing on how more and more storming incidents and craters are being found everywhere in the country. Kuro thinks about it for a minute, and he questions if the person that he encountered was a fugitive or even a crater as well. But as he gets interrupted, a doorbell goes off, and as he was about to check, he looks through a small hole only to see an absolutely deafening sight. His own landlady was standing in an extremely creepy and disturbing pose, and she made this absolutely terrifying expression, calling out to Kuro, and as she screamed in a rhythm, she kept going on and on about how he should open the door right now. Kuro gets spooked out, and he doesn't open the door, as he decided to stay silent. The creepy landlady just decided to stop after banging aggressively on the door, and as she leaves, Kuro has been having an extremely difficult time, and the strange events are really putting him on the edge. As his friend calls him and asks if he's alright, immediately his doorbell goes off one more time, and as he checked, this time from the outside, Haku calls out to Kuro, and as he checked, he was glad to see that his friend Haku was there. As he calls out to him, Haku had decided to bring him some sport drink and jelly, and as he was having a talk with him, from the side, the landlady started to scream on how Kuro is there, and as she quickly dashes, Kuro knew that he needed to run away immediately. As he was about to shut the door, he thanks his friend, but immediately the landlady sticks her absolutely terrifying face inside, and as she looks through Kuro, she stops and asks if he hadn't heard her. As he apologized on how he's kind of feeling sick, she started to go crazy, and she started to ask on how Kuro is much earlier home than ever. As he started to avert his eyes, he was clearly feeling extremely uncomfortable at this point. As his friend Haku decided to leave, Haku intervened, and he was about to close the door, but the landlady was going absolutely nuts, and she tells Haku that she's still talking to her tenant. The creepy landlady became this messed up lady who was getting too out of hand and even going off her way to enter Kuro's place forcefully. But Haku tells her that this is not the way to talk to a person, and as he and Haku roasted her by telling her that she's still full of energy despite her old age, the landlady started to scream on who does he thinks he is talking to. She smacks the door, and immediately she grabs the bag that Haku had brought, and she immediately tosses it to the ground, and she starts to scream on top of her lungs about some rubbish. As her face started to change and become more twisted, Kuro was extremely fearful, and as he looked in her eyes, he saw something extremely creepy. A dark void and a darkness was devouring her. Immediately the landlady gets a deep cut in her throat, and as blood gushed out and both Haku and Kuro saw it, in the next second, some strange explosive started to happen, and as black smoke surrounded her, the landlady screamed, and a loud explosion scatters everything. That's the point when both Haku and Kuro end up encountering a storm. An individual who gets blessed with power, but their mental states are extremely questionable. As the landlady goes into this extremely disturbing phase of shifting, the landlady brings out her hand, and as she was about to strike Kuro, immediately Haku intervenes, and he jumps across to save Kuro, but their threat was not over. Now they are landlocked, and as the landlady started to notice this, the landlady's target was Kuro only, and as she was about to swing one more time, on the other hand, they were too late to even move. As Kuro looks to his side to see his best friend Haku completely paralyzed in fear, immediately Kuro stands up, and he dashes towards her, and he had no idea what he was doing. But from his eyesight we zoom in, and a pitch-black aura filled with dark energy surrounds him, and a mysterious hand guides Kuro through this dark matter. The hand was guiding him, and as it was filled with this marvelous energy, in the very next second, his arm was filled with spirals and so much energy that he lets this energy go, and the entire body of the landlady splits in half, and a loud sonic boom surrounds the entire building. As the landlady unexpectedly met the angels of heaven, Kuro, on the other hand, opens his eyes wide, and as the body of the landlady fell, Kuro just started to gasp for air, and as he looked to his hand, he had no idea what had happened, and all he could think was that since this black mist came out of her body, then it's more certain that he might have killed a human. As he started to really think about this, he was starting to blame himself, and he added that maybe he just became a murderer, and as he was one step closer to losing it, His friend Haku intervened and he tells him that it's alright, and as Haku tells him that he defeated a monster, Kuro started to laugh like a crazy man, and his friend tells him that he needs to calm down, and he tells him in a tender and wholesome voice that in the end, Kuro's heart will always be his, and he did the right thing to save himself. As he was saying this, footsteps were approaching closer from the back, and as a radio sound added on how an anomaly has been confirmed, a woman approaches, and she had a pistol in her hand, and as she loads the gun, she places the barrel right near Kuro's head, and as Kuro sees to his back, a woman with a gun tells him to not move at all. As he started to panic, he immediately decided to do the dumbest thing, and he quickly turned his head around only to have a sharp knife aimed right near his throat. As the woman threw this without any hesitation, this knife was meant to end him immediately, and Haku steps in and he pushes Kuro one more time, and as his arm gets hit, he started to bleed, and as he cried, Kuro, on the other hand, was stargazed. He was confused and he panicked, crying that because of him he had messed up, but immediately Haku, being in the right mindset, cries to him that now is not the time to blame each other, now is the time to run. As Haku started to dash, as Kuro kept looking at Haku's injured arm, he was bleeding, and taking this chance Haku tells his best friend that it's okay, and everything is going to be fine. As they both ran, Kuro kept crying, and in the very next second Kuro's leg was shot, and as he cried from excruciating pain, death was knocking on the door for the two of them. He looked to the side, and the woman who seemed to be targeting Kuro was quietly making her way to Kuro, and as she tells someone through the radio that there was no flexible or fatty muscle transformation, she was from an elite group. She also added that the subject is fluent in language, and as she jumped over the fence and easily clearing a huge dozen-meter jump, she points her gun one more time, and this time she shoots it only for the bullet to almost hit Kuro in his eyes. But as his eyes developed this black flame of some sort, it guided him to dodge the bullet. Now as he questioned this, the assassin quickly brings out her long knife, and she added on how it's impossible for her to miss. But now she decided to just slice Kuro's head, and then she dashes with her knife. Kuro starts to cry to himself that he's not a monster, and why is a monster hunter chasing him? As he started to make this absolutely terrified face, immediately Kuro screams on top of his lungs that he's a human. But just as he said this, a black mist completely surrounds them, and it makes a sphere around him, and all the bullets that were being charged at him were swallowed, and as this sphere completely blocks everything, Kuro, on the other hand, was feeling as if he had been changed. As he looks to his face, a slicing sound startles him from the side, and as he looks to see a sword slicing his perfect sphere, the woman started to add that she needs to cut deeper, and as she looks at Kuro with her hateful eyes, she immediately shoots him right through his shoulder, and as he started to scream, the woman was not holding back, and Kuro started to beg for answers, asking why she's doing this, and as she puts the gun right near his face, the girl tells him that he's a monster, and he needs to die. Now immediately Haku steps in, and he screams that his friend Kuro is not a monster, and as he wanted to make sense, the girl paused for a minute, and she questioned if a normal human is protecting a crater. She warns him that there is a consequence for protecting a monster like his friend, and as she saw Haku's resolve, she cried on how extremely foolish he is, and immediately she brings out her hand, and she punches Haku so hard that his chest caves inward, and he immediately throws up and he flies dozens of feet away. As Kuro calls out to him, he was so heartbroken, and the woman, on the other hand, started to aggressively brush her hair, screaming on how a freaking normal, ordinary human was trying to protect a piece of trash, and as she screamed at Haku to just go back to his normal, disgraceful life, and as she cried on how she was forced to punch a normal citizen, Kuro looks at her wondering if she eats something wrong. She starts to do this weird thing, but as her bipolar personality started to shift, she glares at Kuro one more time, and she starts to come at him with her long sword, and Kuro was in a situation where he didn't know what to do. As he heard a voice from the back complaining on how he started this all, he looks back only to see that there was nothing, and only his friend was laying there. As the woman stood right next to him, immediately she informs her supervisor that she's about to dispose of all the targets, and as a sword slices right through Kuro's neck, it goes all the way through, and as blood gushed from his mouth, the girl slices his head, and she drops him to the ground, and he starts to bleed. The girl looks at him and she adds on how he's pitiful, but as she did it, she was about to strike his brain this time, and she brings out her sword. She was moments away from stabbing him, and immediately a blood drop stops the time itself, and a voice tells Kuro to wake up, and as a devilish murk surrounded him, immediately, energy flowed from him, and darkness developed and covered almost everything. As the hunter quickly moved back, she knew that Kuro was not going to die so soon. As Kuro himself slowly gets up, he clenches his throat, and he started to say something to himself. Now a voice from the back of his head started to warn him that since he had changed, everyone is going to die, and the same hands that guided him to kill the landlady approached him. They started to tell him that he cannot let anyone die, and now since he had brought misfortune upon himself, he needs to deal with this misfortune, and as energy just swelled in him and he became this universal being, he cried that if this figure can help him, then it must help him go back to the way things were. As he opened his eyes, Kuro was unrecognizable, and as a black murk completely fueled him, he tells the crater hunter that he's a human, but as dark hands were grabbing onto his body desperately, Kuro was already far from being a human. And the hunter, on the other hand, starts to stretch her body, and she cried that Kuro needs to pick a side. As she made an absolutely scary face, she tells him that he's a scum of humanity and needs to perish. As they both were about to have a long standoff, immediately, both of them dashed at each other, and the hunter brought her long sword, and as she sliced and used complex combinations on him, Kuro, on the other hand, was in a zone where he remembered on how his friend made him feel normal, and everything was fine in his life, and he remembered holding hands with his mother, and that day, he also remembered his mother holding his hand throughout the day when she was killed. As a few hands literally breaks the fourth barrier of existence and dimension, Kuro was confused, and as a hand literally grabs inward from his brain and internals, the hand grabs his existence, and as he found it impossible to breathe, immediately, he wakes up only to see that he is safe, and he was laying on a bed. He looks around, and a girl greets him, wishing him a good morning with a gentle and cheerful voice. From the back, Haku calls out to Arisa, telling her that he's thankful, and as Haku approached, he asked Arisa that he needs some privacy, and as Kuro was extremely confused, Haku tells him that he doesn't need to confuse himself, and Haku sits down. He looks at Kuro with serious eyes, and he asks him what had happened earlier. As Haku asks him about this, we actually see what really happened on the day when both Kuro and the female hunter fought near the station. Kuro was getting swallowed by something, and as this darkness started to surround more of his face, the female hunter started to go crazy, and as she sliced him over and over again, she noticed that whenever she would strike, a black cloud would emerge. From the clouds, black orbs started to form, and they would occasionally come at her at lightning-fast speed. As she would dodge all of them, she was sure not to be hit by anything, and as she throws another dagger, this time the dagger was again blocked by the same cloud, which actually created a tall wall in front of Kuro, and as the sword was swallowed into it, the female hunter knew that she's fighting something way beyond her normal skills, so she needed to fight it with everything that she had. As this cloud started to surround Kuro aggressively, the hunter tells Kuro that she definitely has no doubt in her mind. As she looks at the absolutely terrifying and devilish figure of Kuro, she tells him that he is a monster through and through. As her concentration was there, immediately we traveled to a different place where the female hunter was reviewing her battle with Kuro, and as they were talking on how this encounter was progressively getting more and more difficult, she cries on how it was perfectly planned, and she was not happy to fight there under those conditions. As they figure out that the person who was fighting their Solider, they found that Kuro was the crater that had almost turned the entire area into his black cloud. But they found a mysterious connection with a video cycle that they were talking about, and as a serious atmosphere surrounded them, they looked at the figure that Kuro had hours and hours ago, and as they added on how this is not normal, Kuro, on the other hand, was smiling through his dark murk. Hearing this question, Kuro had no memory of such things, and Haku started to ask him if he had met someone before this entire stuff had happened to him. As Haku went on and on, Kuro was extremely scared, and he screams at him, asking where exactly he is. As Haku decided not to hide anything from Kuro, he tells him that this place is Tomorrowland, a place that protects people with special abilities like him. And as he asks if they are in the school or something, Kuro started to sweat. Haku was about to tell him something extremely important, and as he was about to break the ice and tell him about how he has developed something evil, immediately he gets up and was about to leave. Sadly, Haku was finding it impossible to explain Kuro that he is a monster. As Kuro started to tell him in a weak voice that Haku is wrong, he questioned exactly who Haku really is, and as Haku lowered his eyes from the side, Arisa joined and she asked if Haku had called her. Using this chance, he leaves Kuro's side, and as Haku approached Arisa, he tells her that she needs to show Kuro everything, and as he quietly left, there was something extremely secretive and dark that he wanted to share, but he still couldn't. As he left, Arisa, on the other hand, calls out to Kuro, and she tells him that it's time. Now as they walked and walked, all Kuro could do was watch Arisa from behind, and as she also noticed how uncomfortable this is, she looks back at him and she tells him that maybe it's time for them to really loosen up a little. As she tells him to breathe in and out, she encourages him to break out from his shell of insecurity and fear, and as he decided to do this, he lets out a confident and refreshing breath, which just opens his eyes and it helps him calm down a little. As he smiles, he was just ready for what's about to come. Arisa immediately grabs his hand, and she started to guide him through the entire place, and using this moment, she explains who exactly Haku is, and as Arisa introduces Haku, she tells him that Tomorrowland is run by Haku, and he was the one who has been leading the gifted people. Hearing this, he realizes they were approaching a door from which a lot of noise was coming. As he went outside, his eyes widened to see that dozens and dozens of people were engaging in furious combat, and all of them were airborne, using magic of some sort, and basically doing something that normal humans can never dream of. As Kuro stood there wondering what is going on, Arisa, on the other hand, tells him that emotions of a human can be used as weapons. As one of the guys forms an icy arm, he smacks it against another person who brings out a super titanium body, and as they both dodge attacks, they started to engage in furious combat, and as a few of the projectiles were flown towards a person, the opponent of this guy dodges it, and one of the projectiles was about to hit Kuro. As the bullets deflect off Kuro, he falls down, asking what is going on, and as everyone takes notice, they immediately gathered around Arisa, and as they saw everything, Arisa started to introduce everything. As there was a serious atmosphere going on, it was slowly turning into something creepy. But as Arisa used her personality to charm everyone, she started to introduce everything. They complained on how they're getting tired of this routine, and now somehow people knew about Kuro, and as she was about to introduce him, everyone asked questions, but strangely, Arisa was the one answering everything, and as Kuro was just looking at her and how she was handling almost all the situation, the crowd was not easy with Arisa when they complained on how she's answering almost everything for a puppy like him. Now one of the men asked if the others are busy and done with their practice, and as he pointed to a warehouse, Arisa asked if Kuro would be interested in checking it out. As they were both about to go to the warehouse, Arisa tells Kuro that whatever is going to happen, they're going to go in and he needs to be ready. Now as the door creaked open inside, he saw a sight straight from the depths of hell. People with terrifying and haunting expressions were there, and it was so creepy and scary that almost every one of them either were demons filled with evil and filled with pain that was indescribable. Right as he saw people sitting watching a TV, immediately he panics, thinking as if he had traveled into a different place, and as he heard a man say something, the strange man was muttering over and over again that he has to kill the girl. As everyone around the TVs were absolutely crazy, they were kind of these drug addicts doing their thing, and on the side, Arisa started to explain on what is happening. She adds that the atmosphere is this dark and serious because the things that these people are watching are their worst memories that they want to forget. In other words, everyone in this warehouse was watching their traumas over and over again to the point that they are so driven by rage and boiling anger that they were becoming unrecognizable. Arisa added on how if he's a special human like everyone else, then his main source of power is his emotion, and since the stronger his emotions get, the more power he can draw. She explains that everyone here are sharpening their powers and preparing their emotions as weapons. Hearing this, his eyes just widen. As she does these weird poses, she basically added on how perception is like linking to powers, and she tells him on how it's important for Crater to always be connected to their past traumas, which allows them to bring out a burst of untapped power and emotions, and this room is basically their training room. Although this is a torture, this helps them to become stronger. As she does even more weird poses, he, on the other hand, had no idea about how to do it and what this really is. As she tells him that they can be less formal, she explains that she considers him as a friend, and they both can talk to each other without any problem. He was deep down extremely happy, thinking to himself that he has a friend. Arisa just tells him every single thing on how Crater actually get their energy and then release their energy. Most likely, Crater manifests their emotions, which leads them to produce more power, and then they create that power into their desired matter. For instance, previously the two individuals released their power in a more solidified way, which allowed their limbs to excel normal capabilities and cause even more damage and influence. As she explained him every single detail, she also added that they are Crater who end up losing their sanity because of this process, and as he remembered how the landlady was one of these examples, immediately from the back he hears that the TV was turned off, and as he looked to his side, all of the Crater get up, and as they were about to leave, everyone in the room turned into different people, and as they approached Arisa, asking how she is, she gets back to them, and as she introduces Kuro to everyone, Kuro speaks for himself, and he was about to say something nice, but instead he starts to stutter for some sort of reason, thinking what to say, and as he was about to refer to himself as a human, From the side, Arisa tells everyone that he is her friend, and she also tells everyone that he is not an enemy, and he's everyone's new friend. From the side, a man approaches him and asks if he is also after the girl, and with an extremely threatening face, he tells Kuro that all of them can kill the girl together. As everyone started to mutter this thing over and over again, Kuro remembered that they're referring to the girl who he encountered earlier, and as he questioned who she is, from the side, everyone started to tell Kuro that he'll be fine, and they're all here to kill the main culprit behind everything. As they muttered over and over again on how they're going to slaughter her, all Kuro could really do was look at the TV, and he questioned if that is the route to all his answers, and as he calls out to Arisa, he tells her that he might want to try this training, and as he tells her that he can handle this, Arisa tells him to sit on a chair, and as he sat down, the TV starts, and the worst of the worst memories that Kuro had started to play. As he watched this, the darkness in the eyes of Kuro also watched it, and he remembered all the things that had happened to him for the past few days. Then, as he saw more pictures and videos, a scene filled with flowers, and as people were happy, this scene appears before him. As he saw this, in the very next second, it all changes to a deadly car crash and a figure standing in front of them, and as absolutely nothing was making sense, the TV starts to act up crazy, and a dark mist immediately emerges from it, and as it was struggling to approach Arisa, on the other hand, every one of the other group members just looked at this extremely odd and weird thing. The hand started to approach Kuro as it was asking help or something, and as Kuro saw a woman-like figure with glowing eyes, Kuro holds out his hand, as he was about to grab this mysterious black mist which resembled a person, and as he was about to touch it, immediately, a loud banging noise occurs, and as Haku intervenes, he stands in front of Kuro, blocking him from this dark mist. He makes this troubled expression, and Kuro was confused, and Haku apologizes to Kuro, and he tells him that he cannot go beyond this. Haku lets out his own energy, and as he looks at that black figure, Haku tells him that it creeps him out, and maybe they should not touch it. As he was about to release some energy, Haku also himself remembers a scene where his mother was laying on the ground, and as he also got the hallucination, in the very next second, he releases a flame that burns the mist to crisp, and as he tells him that the garden is burned, Kuro was confused for a minute, and Haku tells him that their garden is gone. Now as Haku said this, obviously, he had his own secrets, and Kuro, on the other hand, was going absolutely crazy. He had stuff after stuff happening to him, all of them was mysterious, creepy, and weird, and he started to cry on top of his lungs on what is going on. And on the other hand, as everyone around Kuro and Arisa herself started to mutter on how an extremely ill person is joining them, Haku started to tell him that everyone is still not used to his powers, and he started to explain Kuro other stuff, and he kept telling him that his trauma and his hallucination are extremely dangerous for him, but Kuro was not taking him seriously. He screams on what he really is and what is going on around him. In a terrified voice, he screams to everyone that he needs help, and he wants to know everything. But after saying this, he gets dizzy, and as he falls unconscious from the side, Arisa herself asked if everything is all right with Kuro, but from the back, everyone was not happy with Kuro. As Haku screamed on top of his lungs at someone to not shoot, we zoom out, and we see that one of the crater had pointed his nails right near Kuro's head, and as he was barely holding on, Reno was just moments and milliseconds away from smashing several inches long nails straight into Kuro's head. But Haku explains everyone that will surely make sense soon. He adds that Kuro is the key to save everyone, and as he started to explain more stuff to them, Haku glares at Reno, and he tells him in a deafening tone that he needs to lower his goddamn hand. As he does this, he removes the conflict for a short period of time, and as Arisa was also not happy with what had happened, they leave. Shortly after this intense exchange, we learn that Reno and the other creator who were trapped in a medical facility for a long time added on how they don't believe that a messed up kid such as Kuro can be of any help to them, and as Reno looks to his side, he asks Arisa if she herself feels all right being together with Kuro. But as Reno starts to develop this mindset of starting a revolution, he tells everyone that he's just tired of waiting for instructions, and as he said this, immediately, he dashes outside, planning to do something on his own. And our scene changes to the night, and as Kuro was resting, he wakes up only to see that he's back in the place where he was earlier, and as he stood up, he started to call out to Haku and Arisa. But from the back, a voice tells him to get down. As he gets startled by this, immediately, he does so, and two huge nails were immediately stabbed from the side. As he rolls back, a man grabs Kuro by his neck, and he starts to choke, and as Reno with a pissed expression glares through Kuro, he starts to squeeze his hands so tight that Kuro starts to drool from his mouth, and as he cried for mercy, Reno was saying something about a person, but as Kuro questioned this, Reno was extremely furious. He cried on how a low-life trash like him had just made his way into the most sacred place that all of the craters have been building for a long time, and now he's ruining things slowly. And as he squeezed even more, he was one step closer to killing him, and he actually does. Reno squeezed him so hard that Kuro's lifeless body just remained there, and as he drops, Reno brings out his finger ready to burn Kuro's lifeless body. But immediately the black smokes reappear, and as things start to escalate, in the very next second, Kuro reincarnates, and he cries on how it's always him who suffers the most. Now a fight erupts into something that was uncontrollable. They started to smash through walls, and Reno was not holding back, and he started to use maximum force to take down Kuro, and as he punched, the black mist kept surrounding him over and over again. But Reno now is also a gifted person, so he can use his emotion and kill anyone. And as Kuro kept using his black aura to really shield himself, it turns out that he was getting overpowered slowly, and despite being overpowered, Kuro was still finding ways to tackle this difficult thing. But it all started to fail as Reno himself went full berserk mode and even shifted himself into a stage 2 type crater. Now Kuro started to take an extreme amount of damage, and at this point, Kuro started to hear voices over and over again, and it was so deadly that he started to see a figure of a woman that resembled the lady that he encountered in previous chapters. As he started to remember this, she brings out her hand, and she tells him that their training and their assembly must continue, and it's time for them to merge. And as she was about to grab Kuro, immediately, Reno started to become irritated, asking what he's muttering to himself. And that's the point when strange things started to happen inside Kuro's brain, and as black mist started to cover his entire pupils, and he started to become this different human, Kuro, being under the influence and hallucination of something outside his reach, started to mutter to himself that he needs to remember everything. Now Reno questions what the hell he's saying, and as they both ignited in some furious strikes, Reno kept overpowering Kuro over and over again, and as Kuro himself exerted more and more force, Reno realized that Kuro is adapting, and on top of everything, he has been having extremely inhumane, super-level, regenerative powers. But that was the point where Reno himself brings out his trump card, and as vines surrounded him, they started to attack each other, and Kuro developed a new form of magic that lets him use warps and which deflects the attacks. As they fought to almost their deaths, loud explosions were heard that everyone around them could hear. But as Reno threw Kuro in the sky, Reno decided to use his ultimate move, and as he was about to strike Kuro, immediately from the back, bullets started to rain, and few bullets ends up hitting Kuro straight in the head. As the lifeless body of Kuro drops to the ground, Reno, on the other hand, was surprised by another person who sneaks behind him, and he was about to attack, but immediately Reno fires back and kills the crater hunter that was after him. As he tells him on how Kuro is a pain, he decided to move him elsewhere. However, he realized that their entire building has been surrounded by hunters who were looking for them. And as we see the team that was there to kill almost everyone, Reno ends up doing a god's work, and he lifts Kuro up, and he tosses him into the forest, and as Reno starts to take out hunter after hunter, a furious fight ignites on that side. Inside the crater hideout, hunters broke through gates and now were after the entire crater population. Things were becoming extremely dangerous for both sides. On the other hand, Kuro was unresponsive and had bullets drilled in his brain. As he had lost consciousness, he started to lose his life, but the black mist again started to surround him. The two main high-end hunters walked inside the place where Tomorrowland was based in, and as they had pinpointed and checkmated the entire creator population, they added that today they're going to end the Tomorrowland once and for all. Now as they both encountered the supreme leader of the Tomorrowland, Haku was standing there, and he was not happy. As both of the elite hunters bring out their weapons, with quiet steps, Haku walks in, and he was not messing around. As he had a white robe over him, he asked if they are human in this inhumane world. Immediately, the girl with the glasses decided to attack, but Haku was easily able to overcome her, and as he dodged every attack from her side, the other person joined in as well. But Haku started to use his mist and fire powers. As he fought for a moment, both of the elite hunters were able to smash Haku into a wall, and as they were about to kill him, immediately Haku brings out orbs filled with white energy that emits a dangerous smoke that sends them all to the side, and as their fight starts to get dirty, everyone started to get this notification that the energy level around the elite soldiers is increasing steadily. Now the girl with the glasses started to attack the mist that was starting to appear in the entire school, and as they were trying to fight, it turns out that Haku used his power, which allows him to create a mystic and a smoke area in which he can use to fool anyone. The girl started to fight back, but she was not having a wonderful time, and as Haku started to create multiple versions of himself, one of the guys decided to use a long-range attack, and as he started to handle everything, immediately, he was stabbed with a dagger to his stomach, and as he grunted from the excruciating pain, Haku, on the other hand, was outside of his reach, and he was pulling all the strings from the forest. Now the other girl with the glasses pinpointed Haku's exact location, and as she was about to attack him, Haku brings out his hand filled with magic, and as she was about to attack, the girl with the glasses tells him that she has much more experience than him, and as she easily deflected everything, Haku, on the other hand, smiles and asks if the squad leader is going all out. As she was successfully able to strike Haku straight into his chest, blood poured, and as she made a terrible and disgusted expression, immediately from the back, Haku's neck was also covered, and as they drag Haku's body by his neck, they were about to deliver the final strike, and as they did this, they stab him with a long sword that goes straight from his spine all the way to his organs. And as Haku cried on how they're about to open his heart, immediately, the hunters who were about to attack starts to go crazy, and as both fall down on the ground, they started to add that they didn't hear anything, nor anything was wrong, and as they screamed on top of their lungs, Haku decided to play the ultimate trump card. They cried from excruciating pain, and Haku was able to release a stage 3 move, which sends them both elite soldiers to the ground, huffing for air, but they couldn't get anything. On the other hand, the night was giving a really terrible feeling to Haku, and he cried that he needs to find Kuro no matter what. As second went by, the two elites were struggling to breathe, as the smoke that Haku earlier released managed to find its way into their lungs, and now they were one step closer to death. And on the other side, Kuro was nowhere to be found, and a black mist kept enveloping, and as several elite hunters gathered around and fired bullets after bullets, they noticed that they couldn't penetrate a mysterious, disgusting-looking orb that was straight from hell, and it was created in the same place where Kuro was. Now on the other hand, Kuro found himself in a dark space where only he existed, and as a smoky figure started to appear in front of him, the girl who actually was the cause of everything emerged, and as she cried and as she smiled and hummed a tune, immediately Kuro was terrified, and he started to scream, and she, on the other hand, tells him that Kuro is making her seem like a villain, and she asked if he even remembers anything, and she brings out a television. She smacks on it, and she tells him that maybe this will really start their story once again. Now we travel back to a place where a woman was dying, and 4 other kids were around her, crying that their mother is about to die, and that's the point where the tears and everything combined, and as Haku in his adolescent stage looked at Saika, the girl who haunted almost everyone, he cried on who exactly she is, and as she herself looks in the mirror, she sees that she's twisted from top to bottom. She has these 2 emotions and faces attached to her, and as she smiled, she just decided to go out, and that was the time where she learned that she could almost end everything. Then, as a young Saika pointed her finger, she was able to turn 5 fully fed humans into mindless crater, and as they escaped, Saika herself dashed for days and days, and wherever she went, she started to create craters with just a point of her finger, and slowly, the news of craters started to merge, and everyone called them anomalies, and several military teams were established to defeat them, and as Saika, on the other hand, enjoyed the entire process of this, she wanted to end the world. Just like this. Things got so bad that no one had any idea on how to deal with it. But as a young Saika actually saw the amount of things that she had done, she was already too late, and she just basically did whatever she wanted to do. But deep down, she was afraid. As she looks at a dead body of a person, she wanted to go back, and as she tries to look at the body, she ends up falling on some water. She lowers her head, which was filled with anger and sadness, and her emotion were reflected to her through water. She realizes that she was responsible for many bad things. She looked at her face and found how disgusted she was. She had 2 emotions going on. One side of her face was extremely terrified, and the other expression was kind of happy that everything is going this way. As a foot actually lands on her back, a man tosses her into a pool of water, which actually causes her to go inside, and as she kind of travels into this misty and dark area, she falls deep and deep into this ocean. As she was dropping, a hand guides her, and as she opens her eyes, that was the point where the black mist appeared but remained in the water. When Saika opened her eyes, she started to get paranoid, and she quickly gets up. She starts to feel as if she has lost something. Then she looks around, and she decided to dash away, and a black mist remained as she went away from the small area that she was earlier from. On the other hand, after some time, a car was driving extremely fast, and inside, 2 parents were arguing with each other that the son that they had adopted is a monster, and they cried on how they need to get rid of this alien-like figure as fast as possible. As both of the parents were obviously arguing about something extremely serious, they were about to kill a soul to save many lives, and they kept arguing. As young Kuro himself wakes up from this sleep, he realized that his parents were talking to each other, but he didn't know anything, and as he had no idea that his own parents were about to kill him, on the other hand, their plan completely failed, as in front of them a figure emerged, and Saika stood there. Then as both of the parents cried immediately, a loud crash sound sends everyone to the ground, and after some time, Kuro opens his eyes only to see that his foster parents who had adopted him were on their last lifeline, and as the car that they were in was smoking, black smoke itself started to emerge from inside. As he started to realize that he's back in the past, he saw that his parents' dead body started to move, and as he screamed, both of his parents started to become crater, and time stopped. He started to cry, and immediately his parents turned 10 times their size, and as they immediately popped like balloons, blood covered everywhere, and Saika herself came to join the party and explain him every single thing that he's been going through. She tells him that the point of her showing him everything is so he understands the beginning. Originally both Saika and Kuro were same humans, and they were originals, but they were modified and fused together in a single entity, and she explains that they still don't know how this happened. She adds that a cute girl was infused in his body, so for most of his life, Saika and Kuro were basically one, and Kuro was infused with Saika mentally. So basically, Kuro's body and his mentality and his brain was injected with Saika's brain as well. So in Kuro's body, both Kuro and Saika were living in, and earlier, when Saika took over Kuro's body for a long time, Saika went on this rampage using a new power that was never heard of, and as she rained hell on humans, she ended up falling into a pond which caused a strange event which divided both of their mental beings, and Saika was separated from Kuro's body, and Kuro was able to get his body once again. As she explains this in a more complex and detailed way, she basically started to add on how both of them were actually children who were alone, and since there were orphans and were mistreated, they were brought in for research under strict government controls. Some messed up scientists started to experiment on them in order to create a new humanity and new genes that was going to surpass normal human capabilities, and since dozens of scientists were experimenting on them, they did not hold back and did all sorts of things to their brains and their physical capability to the point that they were starting to see results. As she cries on how Kuro must not remember the figure of the mother who was extremely kind to her, she started to explain on how most of the time she was in control of his body, and she basically did all these things that he was now a part of. She explained him every single thing in detail, but as he started to question what the hell she's saying, she tells him that it's dangerous, and he should relax. Saika started to add on how she escaped the facility using his body, and she started to plan their cute freedom in which she was going to turn every human into Crater, a new form of humans which was filled with emotions and had no boundaries. As she started to explain her super messed up grand plan for everything, Kuro's eyes just widened, hearing this, and as a cherry on top, he just learned that a girl was controlling his body for a long time. To gain control over his body she haunted him for years and years. Obviously, all of the other gifted creators from the Tomorrowland themselves were survivors of these government-held experiments, and as he started to add on how he doesn't understand why people who do such things on children, but she added on how after both of them separated, she tried again and again to gather all of the gifted once again to destroy humans. But she ended up messing their lives, but since Kuro was actively rejecting Saika over and over again, she had to disappear and do everything in her merc form. As she started to tell him about her grand plan of how she's going to dominate the entire world, she starts to ask if he would be interested, and as she shares her deep hatred towards the world, she started to explain to him about how humans are not supposed to live, and things that they do to others are just demonic, and she tells him that she's going to make a world where emotions are going to be free and new humans would rule the world. As she asks him to join, Kuro, on the other hand, was not interested, and she started to basically show him on how messed up this human world is, and as she shows him a part where he was bullied, she started to manipulate him on how for most of his life Kuro never ever showed any sign of emotions because his emotions were locked by Saika. As she shows him the dark world, and the terrible things humans do to animals, and to other humans. She explains that humans are the root cause of chaos, sin, and destruction. As she messes with his mind more, he was one step closer to really giving up on everything. She filled him with fear of his existence, and as she asked if he has a heart and emotion, he became hopeless. However, his best friend Haku joins in, and as he washes away all the confusion and all the mystery surrounding his own heart, he tells him to take his hand. As he takes it, Kuro started to cry on how for most of his life, he has been pretending to be a human and he is not real at all. He remarks that he is confused and dominated by two personalities. His own self and emotions were completely locked for decades, and for all his life, he just did whatever he felt was more like a human thing to do. As he cries on how he was always pretending to be human, he shakes hands with his best friend, and he tells him in an absolutely weak voice that a trash like him has no emotions at all. As Haku listened to his friend's cries, Haku tells him that Kuro remembers him, and that is all that matters to him, and as he tells him that his heart is his and his alone. On the other hand, the orb that was being surrounded by dozens and dozens of men started to emerge, and a figure was visible to everyone. From this extremely dark orb, a body emerges, and as this body started to take a form, long hair started to emerge, and it seemed like that the girl that Kuro saw days ago emerged. From the back, Haku also joins, and as all the rest of the elite soldiers started to attack, they were also more interested in finding what type of crater that they are going to encounter. Then as they jumped, immediately with one swing of Kuro's new form, 3 of the elite hunters vanish into nothingness, and all that remained were their weapons and a pool of blood that was just in air for a number of seconds, and as everyone around them saw this act of the devil, they just opened their eyes wide, and immediately Kuro started to laugh on top of his lungs. Saika for years had been trying to overcome Kuro's brain, and since Kuro's brain was shot by bullets, Saika decided to use this opportunity to finally take over his body once and for all. As everyone started to scream, with one swing of Kuro's new form and Saika's new fusion, she swings her hand, and the nearby elite soldiers ended up becoming creators, and as Saika in Kuro's body pointed at Haku, all the crater decided to attack Haku, and from the side, Arisa joins in, and as all the rest of the gifted crater join in as well, they started to fight this one threat that they have. On the other hand, there was still guilt and pressure on Haku's shoulder, as he was also fighting his friend who was being controlled by a psychopath, and Saika actually closed her gap with Haku. She was about to attack him, and as he dodged, immediately he realized there's no holding back, and he needs to go all out, and as he sends several orbs near Kuro's distance, immediately he struck. But Kuro's body was so strong that he jumps literally hundreds of feet in the air, and as Haku himself jumped, he punches her so hard that Kuro's body slams into a nearby building, and it goes all the way through. Saika was having the best time of her life, and as Haku decided to bring more orbs, they fought in a furious battle, and Haku didn't hold back at all, and as Saika started to use different spells, she started to use black holes to kill Haku, and as a few of them actually pierced his body, Saika was going to kill him no matter what. As Haku lands, he questions if it's even possible to defeat a monster like her, and as Saika herself came back, she had overthrown Kuro's body and created a new body from the black mist that she has. As she approached Haku, she tells Haku that it's time for him to say goodbye to his friend, and as she makes this extremely creepy and dangerous expression, she looks up and she starts to call on the sacred text, which was going to release the entire emotional overload of power that Kuro for all his life had been controlling, and as she was about to do this, everyone just looked at her because if she does this, almost everyone that she sees was going to be affected, and the world could end. As Haku was barely holding on, he knew that this is the last chance that he could get to his friend and maybe save him, so as he screamed on top of his lungs, Saika ended up calling up to her final 3rd stage spell, and Haku himself screamed on his highest spell, and as both of them melted into an unreal space, inside there was a huge, wide setting of beds, and as a poor Kuro who was not in control of his body was sitting, from the side, his friend Haku joined in and he asked if he's having a wonderful time or not, and then as they both exchanged a really rather friendly talk, on the other hand, he was getting ready for what Kuro was about to say, and as he said even more and more things, Kuro, on the other hand, tells him that no matter what he talks about, in the very end, Kuro is just a mindless human with no emotion, and he started to belittle himself and talk all sorts of things, adding that he was never real. He was so broken earlier by Saika's words that he was ready to give up on life itself, and as he covered his hand, Haku, on the other hand, tells him that he is happy of whoever he was, and he tells him that he knows for a fact that Kuro has a heart. As he explains on how all humans have a heart, and how they are the most wonderful creation, he answers all of his doubts and worries. As he tears up, both of them were in this tender moment where they were discovering each other and finding who is going to back who, and as Haku brings out his hand, he tells him that they maybe need to return back to their world, and as he says this, Kuro covered his entire face. He stood up, and as he smiled, and as he finally overcame his trauma, his bad beginning and origin, he decided to let go of everything. On the other hand, as Saika realized that her time is over, her eyes open wide, and immediately Saika started to add that this is it for her, and as the black hollow shell that she made all on top of Kuro's body started to crack, everyone saw this from the side, and as Saika gave her last speech about something, she cried that it seemed like Kuro had moved on from himself and is no longer going to be tied by her, and as she withers away, Kuro thanks Saika for everything, and he apologized that she was born into this world and had to suffer because of humans, who for most of her life turned her into a guinea pig, and as he genuinely felt sorry for her, in the very next second, he emerged and Saika disappears into nothingness. As he was about to fall, Haku goes out to grab his friend, and as he places his hand over his shoulder, both of the friends laughed on top of their lungs, finally overcoming a national-level disaster which was about to cause hundreds of lives every day. As time passed on, both Haku and Kuro were about to return to the Tomorrowland, and as Kuro actually saw the signs of maturity in Kuro, they were both ready for what was about to come for their species, and as he made his way to the top, he opened the door with confidence, and as the crater's journey to being accepted by normal humans starts, this beautiful manga ends.